Good morning. Welcome to First Unitarian Church, where our mission is to explore the eternal, nurture community, and pursue the common good. Our memorial candle is lit this morning, and it's lit in honor of the beloved Buddhist teacher, Thich Nhat Hanh, who died yesterday. We will honor him later during our time of meditation. Our opening words today were written by Reverend Dr. Deborah Hafner. You are welcome here. If you are straight, gay, lesbian, bisexual, intersexual, demisexual, pansexual, or asexual, or resist labels completely, you are whole and welcome here. If you are transgender, non-binary, genderqueer, or cisgender, join me in saying you are whole and welcome here. If you are confused about your sexuality, have questions, struggle in an intimate relationship, or struggle because you aren't in one, you are whole and welcome here. If you have had an abortion or an unintended pregnancy, given up a child, had a miscarriage, have AIDS or HIV, struggle with infertility or sexual dysfunction, you are whole and welcome here. If you have been the victim of sexual abuse, sexual harassment, or sexual assault, you are whole and welcome here. If you have made sexual decisions that you regret, you are whole and welcome here. Your sexuality is holy and sacred and an integral part of who you are. You are whole and welcome here. As Unitarian Universalists, we will side with you, love you, and fight for your rights. We seek to create a world where sexuality and sexual diversity is celebrated with holiness and integrity. Our chalice lighting this morning is by Susan Bishop, who is the chair of our Social Justice Council.
We light the chalice as a symbol of our sacred time together. The burning chalice represents the light of reason and science, the warmth of loving community, the cleansing heat of justice, and the flame of hope.
Thank you, Susan. 50 isn't really very old. When I was younger, of course, it seemed ancient. But now that I've rolled over that hill, 50 seems, well, solid, grounded, tested. Yesterday was the 49th anniversary of the Roe versus Wade decision that protected a person's right to choose to have an abortion without excessive government restrictions. But this past year, 2021, was the worst on record since 1973 in terms of the number of restrictions enacted. The Supreme Court has declined to block a Texas law that bans abortions after just 6 weeks. And they have taken on a Mississippi case that could well end Roe altogether. It now seems not just possible, but likely that Roe versus Wade will not make it to 50. If and when that happens, According to the Guttmacher Institute, 26 states are either likely or certain to roll back abortion rights. Some of them will set 6-week limits, like Texas. Others will implement near total bans. And some of them, like our own state of Oklahoma, have layers of restricted laws in place and are just waiting for the trigger of Roe falling to implement them. It is not an exaggeration when I say we are fighting for lives. We are fighting for the lives of women and all people with a uterus who will no longer have access to safe and legal abortions. And as terrible as that threat alone is, we are fighting for much more, because this is about more than reproductive health or abortion rights. This is about control over bodies. Cisgender women's bodies, trans bodies, intersex bodies, Black bodies, brown bodies, because the so-called pro-life movement isn't about saving babies, not at its root. It's about controlling bodies. Specifically, it is about controlling those bodies that threaten the supremacy of white, straight, cisgender men. And some might say, well, there she goes, getting all political again. But I want to tell you that this is not about politics. The so-called religious right does not own that word, religious. It isn't that they are somehow on the side of the divine and the rest of us, including the majority of Americans who believe in reproductive self-agency. It's not just that we are out here fighting some purely secular battle. When Unitarians and Universalists consolidated into one faith, one of Unitarian Universalism's very first statements of social witness was a general resolution on the reform of abortion statutes back in 1963. Since then, at least 12 statements have related specifically to abortion rights, and many more have affirmed the values of reproductive justice more generally. Reproductive justice, which considers not just the right to abortion and birth control, but considers these issues through the lens of racial justice and intersectional oppressions, is a part of our faith. Reproductive justice isn't some fringe political topic. It is an aspect of our identities as Unitarian Universalists. And so today, we'll explore the topic of reproductive justice through readings, music, and personal stories. While you will not see any of the horrific images you might find at a so-called pro-life rally, some of what you see and hear in this service may bring up some painful memories. I ask that you be tender and gentle with yourself. Feel free to move away from the screen, take a break. If you need to, watch the rest later on our Facebook page or YouTube channel if it feels like too much for one sitting. And remember that you, all of you, including your most precious, most vulnerable, and most perfect body, you are loved. Our opening hymn is "How Could Anyone" by Libby Roderick, performed by Becky Talent.
How could anyone ever tell you you were anything less than beautiful? How could anyone ever tell you you were less than whole? How could anyone fail to notice that your loving is a miracle? How deeply you're connected to my soul. How could anyone ever tell you you were anything less than beautiful? How could anyone ever tell you you were less than whole? How could anyone fail to notice that your loving is a miracle? How deeply you're connected to my soul. How deeply you're connected to my soul.
Every Sunday, we take an offering. Since 2002, all the cash and designated checks from that offering have gone directly to external nonprofit organizations doing good work, our Change for Change partners. For the month of January, our Change for Change partner is Planned Parenthood Great Plains. Planned Parenthood Great Plains provides birth control, family medicine, STI testing and treatment, transgender care, information on pregnancy options, and other critical health services to individuals and families in Arkansas, Kansas, Missouri, and Oklahoma. You can make your gift by sending a check to First Unitarian, just write Change for Change on the memo line, or make an online payment through our website, oneuc.org.
My roots go down, down into the earth. My roots go down, down into the earth. My roots go down, down into the earth. My roots go down. My roots go down, down into the earth. My roots go down, down into the earth. My roots go down, down into the earth. My roots go down. I am a wildflower pushing through the stones. I am a wildflower pushing through the stones. I am a wildflower pushing through the stones. My roots go down. My roots go down, down into the earth. My roots go down, down into the earth. My roots go down, down into the earth. My roots go down. I am a willow swaying through the storm. I am a willow swaying through the storm. I am a willow swaying through the storm. My roots go down. My roots go down, down into the earth. My roots go down, down into the earth. My roots go down, down into the earth. My roots go down. I am a mountain reaching for the sun. I am a mountain reaching for the sun. I am a mountain reaching for the sun. My roots go down. My roots go down, down into the
Chris, could you go on to play our reading?
Just one moment. Just
October 3rd, 2021, and modified for use with Reproductive Justice Sunday. Everyone loves someone who had an abortion. And let's talk about the flip side. If you had an abortion, you are loved. If you've never told a soul, or if you share your story regularly, you are loved. If you are confident in your decision or wonder if it was the right choice, you are loved. If you are a queer, non-binary, trans, two-spirit, or a cis woman, you are loved. If you are child-free by choice or want to have kids eventually, you are loved. If your choice was driven by medical viability or your own emotional health, you are loved. If you found a provider to care for you or had to rely on yourself, you are loved. If you are always pro-choice or if your choice conflicts with your beliefs, you are loved. If you love your body or you're still angry with your body, you are loved. If you believe God loves you or you believe in nothing divine at all, you are loved. If you find yourself reflected here, or your truth is more than words and ink posts can, you are loved.
When I told him I just could not continue the pregnancy, he said, well, you could go to Planned Parenthood. But he said that with his back turned to me. And turns out it was not a clinic at all. It was only an educational facility. They asked me all the same questions about why I wanted an abortion and all kinds of intrusive questions. And they finally decided that they could and would refer me to the Clergy Consultation Service on Abortion, which I'd never heard of. So I went to see a minister at the Old South Church. I don't know what denomination it was. And he referred me eventually to a doctor in Montreal. There were 4 of us having abortions, and I was the first. I was hoping this guy was a doctor. There was a woman in a white dress and white shoes, and I was hoping she was a nurse. There was no anesthesia. My pregnancy was very early, which meant that it was more painful than it would have been a couple of weeks later. It was really painful, and I yelled, and he told me to keep quiet. And as soon as he had finished, I vomited up the soup I'd eaten. I did hear one of the women talk about having had an abortion before, and the doctor she named was my doctor who had delivered both my children. Imagine. Several months later, I again had a diaphragm failure and was pregnant again. But this time I thought, let's go the legal route. After all, I'm a school teacher. I'm a law-abiding citizen. So I called Dr. Sewell. He was agreeable, but the routine in Massachusetts at that time was you had to have a psychiatrist's approval that you would take your life if you continued your pregnancy. So I went for that appointment, which was very humiliating. I was energized. I was pretty furious about my experience. And I sought out a doctor at the Boston Lying In Hospital who was, I think, head of OBGYN. From somewhere I had the information that he was involved with a group of professional people who were planning in Massachusetts to have a counseling service to refer women to New York City once abortion became legal there in July of 1970. At the same time the New York law became legal, was implemented, we moved to Ohio. And there I very quickly got involved in an abortion rights legalization group. There were 4 organizational members of this coalition. Planned Parenthood, of course, where we met, and that was the entity that had secured the funding. The Free Clinic, the Cleveland Women's Counseling, and the Clergy Consultation Service on Abortion, who was represented by an African-American Episcopal priest. So we talked to women who were desperate to have an abortion and referred them either to New York, if they could afford to go, or through this routine in Ohio. In New York, there were 2 very big clinics. I mean, they were seeing women from all over the country. And the one that we referred to was called Women's Services. It was started by the Clergy Consultation Service on Abortion, which was a national, really kind of an undercover ecumenical group. We continued until the law changed until the Supreme Court ruling in Roe versus Wade. There was a heck of a party that night at our house.
I remember it.
You were scared because it was a packed house. Everybody just came. It was packed, and you couldn't find your mommy. We were just in disbelief. We could not believe that abortion had just become legal. Like tomorrow, it's going to be legal. And it was true that very quickly abortion clinics did spring up, and very quickly we discovered that they were not offering private counseling to every patient, which we thought was very important. And they weren't giving reduced fees to anybody. And a lot of women were seeking abortions because they couldn't afford to have a child. So we decided we had to jump into the fray and have an abortion clinic.
How is that for you now, sitting where we are in this moment in history?
How it is for me is really sad. I was so determined that my daughter should never have to go through anything like I went through. And to think that we are on the cusp of being exactly there once again is just horrifying.
So what difference did it make that there was clergy involved?
I think everyone would agree with my belief that the clergy were like the good housekeeping stamp of approval. They were the legitimizing force. It means a lot to me that Reverend Bill is staunchly pro-choice And I was just delighted to know that he was a board member of RCRC, the Religious Coalition for Reproductive Choice. I could not belong to a church that was not pro-choice. I would hope that there are people within the church who would form a group of pro-choice people prepared to do whatever was needed. I was just listening to a podcast, and John Lewis was talking about the struggle for voting rights. And I thought how important what he said is for reproductive rights now. That the only thing that ever did work was organizing and staying organized and being unwilling to be defeated. Do not give up. You just can't. Because the pendulum will come around again. It's bound to. Because it's right.
The great Buddhist teacher and monk and peace activist Thich Nhat Hanh passed away at the age of 95 yesterday. In his honor, I'd like to read a couple of his quotes, and then I will invite you to sit for a moment in silence. The first reading is called, "I Am Not Here." Quote, "I have a disciple in Vietnam who wants to build a monument for my ashes when I die. He and others want to include a plaque with the words, 'Here lies my beloved teacher.' I told them not to waste the temple land. Do not put me in a small pot. Do not put me in there," I said. "I don't want to continue like that. It would be better to scatter the ashes outside to help the trees to grow." I suggested that if they still insist on building a monument, they have the plaque say, "I am not in here." But in case people don't get it, they could add a second plaque, "I am not out there either." If people still don't understand, then you can write on the third and last plaque, "I may be found in your way of breathing and walking," unquote. And another, quote, "This body is not me. I am not caught in this body. I am life without boundaries. I have never been born and I have never died. Over there, the wide ocean and the sky with many galaxies all manifest from the basis of consciousness. Since beginningless time, I have always been free. Birth and death are only a door through which we go in and out. Birth and death are only a game of hide and seek. So smile to me and take my hand and wave goodbye. Tomorrow we shall meet again, or even before, We shall always be meeting again at the true source, always meeting again on the myriad paths of life. Unquote. Please join me in honoring Thich Nhat Hanh's memory and in honoring the source of truth and in life that is within each one of us by joining me in a moment of silence. Into the space of emptiness and infinite abundance, may we also lift up the thoughts and cares of our hearts. Amen. And blessed be. Remaining in a meditative state, let's listen to this music composed by our very own Chris Gonzalez.
When I write my memoir, the first line is likely to be, unlike most people, I learned about sex from my parents and religion from my friends. My parents were remarkably open about sexuality, and my mom is here someplace in the Zoom world listening. I found my mother's birth control pills in the kitchen when I was 7, and I asked her what they were. And she answered my question directly. Those are birth control pills. We've had the children we want, and so I take this each day so we can enjoy sex without worrying. I know. When I was 11, my parents took us on a field trip to Fire Island so we could see gay people. At dinner, we discussed civil rights, the women's movement, and yes, sex. It wasn't until I was in college that I learned that most parents don't talk to their children about sexuality, that most people grow up with a complicated stew of misinformation, myth, fear, guilt, shame, confusion about their sexuality, and it often comes from their religion. So I want you to think for a moment, might even raise your hand in your box. Did the church of your youth tell you that your sexuality was a blessing from God and that you should celebrate it? Or I'm watching or did you learn that sexuality needed to be controlled, that your sexual feelings were wrong, and that sex only belonged in a monogamous, lifelong heterosexual marriage, preferably with procreation as the goal? Or maybe you got mixed messages about your sexuality from your religion. Or some of you are thinking, they never mentioned this at all. For more than 45 years now, my vocation has been helping people understand that sexuality is a central part of life for all of us. No matter how old we are, no matter our gender, our orientation, our romantic orientation, and to work to help people understand that their sexuality, their spirituality, and how they practice their faith are intimately connected. During the past 20 years, my ministry has helped thousands of religious professionals, congregations, and denominations become sexually healthy and just. And I've organized religious progressives to speak out for sexual justice. But I want to take you back even further. I have vivid memories of January 22nd, 1973. That was the day that the Supreme Court overturned the ban on abortions in the US. I was a fresh woman in college. We were elated. The days of having to arrange rides to New York City for abortions were going to be over. The days of women dropping out of high school and college to have babies they were ill-equipped to raise were over. We thought this right was secure forever. The first time I marched for women's rights was in 1976. I wore a long white dress with a purple and yellow sash modeled after the suffragettes. I was 22. I have lost track of the number of times I have marched or spoken at rallies in Washington, D.C. I have counted 28 since January of 2016. My family, including our 4-year-old daughter, marched for access to abortion in 1989. I was 35. We marched again in 2003 as a family, and that time I was a speaker at a rally in front of the Capitol. In 2016, I spoke at a rally at the Supreme Court as it heard a case about abortion clinics. You can actually watch that speech on my website. And this past December 1st, I was once again back in the court. Here's a slide, a picture of me with my Unitarian Universalist colleagues. That's 45 years of protesting on abortion rights. When I was there this past December, I couldn't help but think of this sign that I saw at the Women's March in 2020, held by a woman older than me. I was 19 when Roe was decided and 62 when marriage equality became the law of the land, and I thought we were done with having to fight for sexual rights. We aren't done. The last administration worked mightily to roll back sexual rights, even as the president boasted on national TV about his sexual conquests. In 2021, 8 states enacted bills against transgender people, limiting their rights to sports, to bathrooms, even to medical care. And many more states are considering these bills this year. I know you know that Texas enacted a law banning all abortions at 6 weeks of pregnancy, 4 weeks post-conception. And there is a Mississippi law that bans abortion at 15 weeks that is currently being deliberated by the Supreme Court. Most of the leaders I know in the reproductive justice movement believe that the Roe decision will be overturned this year. Overturned. 21 states are ready to ban abortion when that happens. See, what you need to understand is that abortion and LGBTQ rights are intertwined. The Supreme Court cases that gave gay people the right to have sex, and yes, that was not given to them until 2003, and the right to marry are based on the Roe decision's affirmation of a constitutional right to privacy. But it's more than just the legal aspects. Both reproductive rights and sexual orientation rights are fundamentally about the right to be able to live your sexual, intimate, personal life without governmental interference. All adult sexual rights, the right to marry, the right to pleasure, the right to bodily autonomy, are endangered if anyone's rights to a consensual adult sexual relationship is imperiled. And all of this is happening despite the fact that most Americans support sexual rights. 7 in 10 Americans believe abortion should be legal, at least in some circumstances. And an equal percentage believe that there should be laws protecting LGBTQ plus people from discrimination. People from every religion support the right of individuals to make their own moral decisions. Clear majorities from every religious tradition in the United States support safe and legal abortion, except evangelical Christians. Now, what I want to tell you is there is nothing new about this religious support for sexual and reproductive justice. More than a dozen major religious denominations passed policies, some as many as 60 years ago, to support access to legal abortion. In the 1960s, it was clergy who opened the first abortion clinic in New York City in the United States and who fought for the repeal of abortion laws. Our denomination, Unitarian Universalism, was in the vanguard of promoting women's and LGBTQ rights. So we, my friends, we need to call the attacks on women and attacks on LGBTQ people what they are: immoral attacks on people's rights and moral agency. Laura Penny, a journalist, wrote this in the New Republic: "We live in a society that is comfortable letting men get away with sexual violence, but determined not to let women get away with consensual sex." She goes on, "It is time to be completely clear. Forcing a woman to give birth against her will is morally equivalent to rape. It is the same logic of entitlement and abuse. Men get to control women's bodies. Female sexual agency must be punished. Women's consent doesn't matter." So, as people of faith, we cannot allow the extreme right to be the voice of religion in the public square. We need to reclaim the Bible, the flag, after January 6th, democracy, and for those of us who are theists, God, from those on the right who claim to own them. Now, we have work to do. We must do a better job of articulating consistent and common sense moral messages. We need to say the sin is never sex and sexuality. The sin is sexual violence, sexual harassment, sexual abuse, and misconduct. The sin is never homosexuality, but heterosexism, the presumption that there is one way to love. The sin is not transgender people, but transphobia. The sin is forcing a pregnant person to carry a pregnancy to term and give birth against their will. The sin is to deny anyone their God-given gift of who they are, of their own sexual and gender identity, or the information, services, and rights they need to make responsible decisions. See, I know from all of my work all these years that America understands that the goal of sexuality education is to develop healthy sexual adults who appreciate their own bodies and interact with all genders in respectful ways. We must have a goal to help people, regardless of who they love and who they are attracted to, if anyone at all, to make decisions congruent with their own personal values. All of us have to learn to discriminate between sexual behaviors that are life-enhancing and those that might be harmful to someone else. We need to articulate a new ethic for a moral sexual relationship. It is not a wedding band that makes sex moral, or whether the partners are straight or gay or bisexual, but whether the relationship is consensual, non-exploitive, honest, mutually pleasurable, and protected against disease and pregnancy. We need to say that love is love is love. Everyone must have the ability to affirm their sexual and gender identity and to live without discrimination, fear, and violence. We, as progressives, must affirm that freedom of religion means that government cannot privilege the teachings of one religion over another. We know no single religious voice can speak out for all faith traditions or all people of faith on such sexuality issues as abortion, same-sex partnerships, gender, sexuality education, stem cell research, and so on. And I believe that America understands that government should not take a side on religious differences. The founding document of my organization was called the Religious Declaration on Sexual Morality, Justice, and Healing. It was endorsed by more than 8,000 American religious leaders. It claims sexuality is central to our humanity and integral to our spirituality. It recognizes that almost every faith tradition starts with a celebration of the goodness of our bodies and our sexuality, and that too many have suffered when sexualities have been abused or exploited. It calls on congregations of all stripes and kinds to look at how they offer sexuality education, not just to youth, but to people of all ages, including midlife and elder adults, how we welcome all, and how we have policies and procedures to keep people free from sexual abuse, harassment, and misconduct. At some point in the future, I'd love to do more work with this fellowship on those issues in your own policies. The closing words of the Religious Declaration state, God rejoices when we celebrate our sexuality with holiness and integrity. And so may it be for each of us, for our children and for our grandchildren in all the days ahead. So may it be. Amen.
We Unitarian universalists, who have long been known to be a bit too much in our heads, have been moving towards a more authentic recognition of our bodies.
All this joy,
These bodies,
all this sorrow,
these bodies,
all this promise,
nor recognize it in others.
all this
In
pain.
which we can experience the interdependent web of all existence.
Such
For it
is
through
life,
that we are a part of the selfsame web.
such
Let us
is
the
peace,
whole of ourselves to do all we can
such is spirit,
against all bodies, known and unknown,
such
near
is
and far,
love.
friend and stranger.
City of joy,
To inhabit these bodies,
city of
to
sorrow,
celebrate these bodies, to defend,
city of promise,
see to it. Amen.
city of pain.
love. World of joy, world of sorrow, world of promise, world of pain. Such is life. Such is being, such is spirit, such is love. All this joy, all this sorrow, all this promise, all this pain, but such is life. Such is being, such is spirit, such is love. Such is spirit, such is love.
We extinguish this flame, but not the light of love and community, which burns in our hearts.
Chris, do you have Zell's final reading?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
We Unitarian Universalists, who have long been known to be a bit too much in our heads, have been moving towards a more authentic recognition of our bodies and in our bodies. Hallelujah and blessed be. These bodies are homes, these bodies our being, these bodies without which we can neither have inherent worth nor recognize it in others, these bodies without which we cannot experience the interdependent web of all existence, for it is through our bodies that we are a part of the selfsame web. Let us pledge ourselves, the whole of ourselves, to do all we can to protect against gendered violence, against all bodies, known and unknown, near and far, friend and stranger. Let us pledge ourselves, the whole of ourselves, to inhabit these bodies, to honor these bodies, to celebrate these bodies, to defend these bodies. So be it. See to it. Amen.
After the postlude, I invite you to take a short break and then come back and join us for our virtual coffee hour, where we'll break out into small groups for casual conversation. If you are joining us for the first time today, or if you've been attending for a while and would like to learn more about First Unitarian, please join us for a new Friends Gathering, which will happen in a separate Zoom space at the same time as the coffee hour. You can find the links to both in the chat, or if you're joining us on Facebook, send us a direct message and we'll get you the Zoom link. But for now, I leave you with this blessing. May you go from this time and space in peace and strength. May you find the courage to keep on fighting for what you know in your heart is right and good. May you remember that your flesh and blood body is perfect just as it is, and that it is your body. But may these words of Thich Nhat Hanh, and we'll be sure to spell out his name in the comments, also resound in you. You are not caught in this body. You are life without boundaries. Since beginningless time, you have always been free. Our postlude today is number 354 in our gray hymnal, We Laugh, We Cry, words and music by Shelley Jackson Denham, performed by Warren Palmer and Becky Talent.
We laugh, we cry, we live, we die, we dance, we sing our song. We need to feel there's something here to which we can belong. We need to feel the freedom just to have some time alone. But most of all, we need close friends we can call our very own. And we believe in life and in the strength of love. And we have found our need to be together. We have our hearts to give. We have our thoughts to receive, and we believe that sharing is an answer. Our lives are full of wonder, and our time is very brief. The death of one among us fills us all with pain and grief. But as we live, so shall we die, and when our lives are done, we memories we shared with friends, they will linger on, and we believe in life and in the strength of love, and we have found a place to be together. We have the right to grow. We have the gift to believe that peace within our living is an answer. We seek elusive answers to the questions of this life. We seek to put an end to all the waste of human strife. We search for truth, equality,